So a friend of mine who happens to be a US citizen started a business in Panama. He gives me a call and he says, Javier, I'm pretty happy. I have an offshore business. That means I don't have to pay any tax unless I distribute dividends to myself, right? And then I told him, well, my friend, I'm sorry, but the answer is not that simple. So if you want to learn more about CFCs and American citizens and how you're taxed with your foreign companies, stay tuned for this video. Hi there, my name is Javier Correa, and I'm a Research and Development Associate here at Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors move overseas, establish business structures, and optimize your tax. Now, this video is especially made for my US citizen friends out there who live overseas. Maybe you're already qualifying for the foreign earned income exclusion, and you've set up a small business. Maybe you have a restaurant, maybe you have a consulting company, and you're legitimately running your business overseas. And you might think, well, I'm an American. I understand that I'm globally taxed individually, but my business is not an American business. Do I have to pay tax on it? And so we have decided to make a 2-part video explaining the 2 potential tax implications of running a business through an offshore corporation as an American. This is going to be the first segment in here, and we're going to discuss Subpart F income in particular. So before we move forward with explaining what Subpart F is, I first have to explain when these rules are applicable. So it is important to understand that American citizens are taxed no matter where they are and are subject to US tax regulations regardless of where they live. This means that US controlled foreign corporation rules will apply to you regardless of whether you live in New York or you live in Dubai or in the Cayman Islands. So having established this, what is a controlled foreign corporation? Well, in a simplified way, to not get into many details, if you're an American and you own 100% of your offshore business, that is a controlled foreign corporation. To put it bluntly, if you as an American own 50% or more of a non-US company, that is going to be considered a controlled foreign corporation. Now, there might be certain ways in which you can have multiple US citizens that are partners in a business, and if they don't own 10% or more, they're not considered US shareholders. But globally speaking, unless you have multiple partners and you have a very complex structure, that won't apply to you. So I'm trying to keep this one simple. So again, if you own 50% or more of a business offshore, it's going to be a controlled foreign corporation, and that triggers 2 very important consequences in the United States. So that would be number 1, Subpart F, number 2, guilty. And again, just to keep you up to date with everything, so 50% is the limit. If you own 50% or less, you're good. If you own more than 50%, then it's no good. It's a CFC, okay? Just to keep that clear. Now, moving on to Subpart F income. So what is Subpart F income? So Subpart F income has been present in the US tax code since the early 1960s, and it essentially is an effort made by the US government to prevent American citizens and American multinational corporations from artificially deferring taxation by using offshore companies. Now, there are multiple segments of Subpart F income, but today I want to focus on the 3 most common ones. So the first one would be the personal holding company inclusion. So what is a personal holding company? Let's say, I have Jack. Jack is my best friend. He was born in Miami, and he tells me, oh, Javier, don't worry, I'm going to put all my investments into a BVI company. Don't sweat it. I'm going to put my investments in a BVI company, and I'm just going to keep everything there, and I'm only going to pay myself a dividend when I need the money, and therefore I don't pay tax on that. Well, unfortunately, my friend Jack, the US citizen, he's wrong. Any income that you retain in a foreign controlled corporation as a US citizen is still taxable in the United States so long as it's completely passive income. So that means dividends, interest, rents, royalties. You can't really defer taxation by putting that in a foreign corporation. You might gain some privacy, you might gain some confidentiality, a bit of asset protection, but definitely no tax savings there. Now, obviously, again, following the rules, if you have a foreign partner in that company and you own 50% or less as a US citizen, then sure, you might be able to defer taxation, at least from a Subpart F standpoint. There are other rules you may need to consider like PFIC, but that is subject for another video. But at least from the Subpart F perspective, you might be able to defer some taxation. Number 2 would be the foreign-based sales income. And I will allow myself to read this directly to you so the guidelines are completely clear. So when a controlled foreign corporation, and this is obviously always from a US perspective, either buys or sells tangible property and all of the following conditions are met. A, the transaction is done from, to, or on behalf of a related party, and the property is 1, manufactured, produced, constructed, or extracted outside the country where the CFC is incorporated. And lastly, the property is purchased or sold for consumption or disposition outside of the country where the CFC is incorporated. So what does this essentially mean in layman's terms? This essentially means that if you build up a CFC as part of your company group and you use that company to basically buy and sell tangible property, and the CFC has no other reason to exist other than tax deferral and is not really doing business in the country where it's meant to do business, and you're using it as part of your structure to shift certain profits away from your US company, guess what? That's a Subpart F inclusion, so it's not really going to help you defer any taxation. And then last but not least is the foreign-based services income inclusion. So I'll allow myself to read it to be precise once again. When a CFC either provides services and all of the conditions below are met. So number one, the services are performed for or on behalf of a related person, and B, the services are performed outside of the country of incorporation of the CFC, then it would be considered Subpart F income and therefore fully taxable in the US, regardless of whether you pay yourself out dividends or not from the foreign subsidiary. Okay? So once again, what does this mean? This means that you can't simply set up a company in a zero tax jurisdiction or a low tax jurisdiction and claim that it is providing management services or marketing services and just shift profits away from the United States into one of those companies. Now, as you may have noticed, there are some specific rules that have to be met. So does that mean that Subpart F is not entirely avoidable? No, actually Subpart F is much more easily avoidable than part 2 of this video series, which will be guilty, and we'll get into that in the next video. But globally speaking, if you're an entrepreneur and you're running an active trader business as a US citizen overseas, that your company is either performing its duties from its country of incorporation or it is simply not dealing with related parties, so it only provides services and goods to legitimate third parties that are not related to you in any way, then you can pretty much avoid Subpart F income. In fact, prior to guilty coming into law, essentially you only had to worry about Subpart F income, and it was much more easy for American citizens to potentially defer some taxation provided that their business respected all these rules. So I hope you stay tuned for part 2, where we're going to talk about guilty, which is much more difficult to avoid, and it has become a bit of an issue for a lot of entrepreneurs that are American that run their business overseas. But if you want to, in the meantime, learn more about Subpart F, learn more about guilty, and learn more about how you can optimize your taxes as an American in general, then stay tuned to our YouTube channel, follow us on Instagram, and check out our website. Thank you for watching.